welcome back. It's still the newspaper review right here on High Impact Television, and I'm currently being joined by Dapo Adaramewa. He's a public affairs analyst and an educator. Welcome to the newspaper review, Doctor.
Thank you very much.
I just said Doctor.
Yes, you're predicting the future, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Now, yesterday, Mr. President had an exclusive interview with some of the top journalists in the country, talking about sundry issues in the country. So let's start from insecurity. I believe you listened to him.
Yes, I listened
and
to
its
him,
response.
I listened to him several times, actually.
Okay.
I watched it. I think, unfortunately, the president gave a good response, but a very typical response in the sense that Nigeria, the culture has now become, there's a steady amount of insecurity, but when it spikes in cases where, all of a sudden 50 people die in one day, the chief security officers, they're called in by the president and they're told to go out and stop the insecurity, at which point they go out, I assume, some exercises are launched with grand names, Operation Tiger, but that doesn't translate to an end of insecurity. We then forget about that particular incident, and then it just kind of steadies out. Every day Nigerians are dying from insecurity. That is just a fact, right? And the only reaction seems to come is when that number spikes, and I'm very worried about that trend because listening to the interview, I don't see a path out of this insecurity. I haven't seen anything new being discussed as, okay, we're trying this new approach, It seems the same approach that we've taken for the past 8 years is what we are taking.
But don't you think, because whilst the president was having that conversation, he talked about, before his administration came into place, about 18 or so local governments were under the control of ISWAP or Boko Haram terrorists. And immediately his administration came into place, about those 18 local governments that were under the control of terrorists all have been completely taken over and taken back by the Nigerian military forces. That's quite an achievement.
Yes, most definitely. That is a laudable achievement. And while in some cases it would be enough to give a round of applause, but there are many Nigerians right now who are crying because they've lost loved ones. You can't explain to those people that, yes, we've made some progress, but not enough progress. So long as people are dying, the government is not doing its basic function, which is a primary function, which is secure the lives and properties of Nigerians.
Okay. Now, let's look at it because they talked about insecurity and then they move away from that to the economic aspect of insecurity, which is somehow attached and related to banditry,
Yes.
where you talked about bandits, whether it's the cause of the weather, moving from the northern part of the country to the southern part of the country, and that has equally translated to another level of insecurity, which they said named bandits. Terrorists.
Yes.
And it's like that has been done.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think that's a step in the right direction. Yes, we should make it clear that these people are terrorists. But in terms of the role that the weather plays in terms
Yes.
of the migration and all of those kind of things, I mean, that is not really a solution. If the weather pushes them down south and then pushes them back up north, we're just moving the problem around, aren't we? Or if the weather means the problem subsides for a little while, it's not the solution that we're looking for. We're looking for lasting solutions, right? And that's what we need to focus on.
Lasting solutions, you say you talked about grazing routes being restored. Could you think that when you give that position, that could be one of the panacea to that problem?
It is one alternative solution, but I think we've discussed on this show the idea of reserves, which is why a lot of southern governors have actually banned open grazing. And around the world, nobody really does migration routes anymore. We can have reserves. The government can allot land for these purposes so that we don't have these clashes anymore. I think that's a more realistic solution, because to say that we'll establish grazing routes and, who would enforce these grazing routes? Are we talking about deploying the military into the jungle consistently? How expensive is that going to be? It's much easier if we say this is the reserve for what you have to do and stay on that land.
Okay, let's move away from that. The economy. The president spoke extensively about the economy and the need for infrastructural development to be put in place. He equally referred to his minister of road transportation and and infrastructural development. Do you think they've achieved some form of plaudits in that aspect as well?
Yes, most definitely. I think in the area of infrastructure, this government has been effective. I personally have taken the train myself a few
Okay.
times, which I've never done in Nigeria before. So they are taking steps in the right direction in terms of infrastructure. But in terms of the economy itself, when we're looking at all some of the key metrics, and I remember watching in the interview when he was asked about things like, the indices around unemployment, the indices around the debt profile of the nation. The response was something along the lines of discussions about farming. That's the main thing, which worries me, because if we're talking about all these metrics that show that the country is on a downward trajectory, and our response is that we need to get more people to the farms, I can't link those two things together, and so it worries me.
Okay. Still in the economy, you talked about the economics and the metrics, and equally remember the issue of restructuring
Mm.
was brought into place about the devolution of power to the states government, so that at least somehow the federal government will have not very pressing needs. The states government as well could have some of those areas they could attend to that will relieve the government of some of those pressing needs. Do you think that will contribute positively to the economic development, and
I,
how?
Yeah, I think most definitely. I think restructuring, and the question around what is restructuring to you, what is restructuring to me,
Exactly.
a lot of work has been done around that. I remember under the Jonathan regime, they did this national conference, spent a whole lot of
2014.
money, and brought in all stakeholders from Nigeria and sat down and said, what is restructuring to all of us? A paper was created after that. We don't know where that paper is. It's available online, but has it been used? Subsequently, the APC government, in fact, did something similar and came up with another report. So, discussions around we don't know what restructuring is to you or to me, we already have documents of what a general consensus of what restructuring looks like. Now, the question is, what steps have been taken in that time towards actualizing some of those recommendations?
When he was talking about the conceptualization of a restructuring and all of that, from what you've heard from different political stakeholders, what would you say that the concept around restructuring really is?
The general concept is to give more power to the states to take care of certain affairs, to make sure things like issues like security and state policing are enacted. And it goes further in terms of empowering the states to take care. Because you see, what happens in Nigeria currently is there's a terrible scramble for power at the center, right? And it you know it's a distraction from everything else that could be achieved. And so if we are able to, separate those powers a bit, then that is a start. But the document is very extensive, a few hundred pages. And so we won't have the time to, go through all of that. But I think let us start with, restructuring and the devolution of power and true federalism, in the sense that, it's not the center that gives to the states, it's the states that, give a little bit to the center.
Now, when we talk about restructuring, let me quickly digress a little before we
Okay.
continue with the president's speech. About recently in Magodo area, there was this altercation between the chief executive of the state and the police officer, the chief superintendent of police that was there to enforce the directive of the inspector general of police. And the governor, as the chief security officer of the state, gave an instruction, but the police officer refused to obey that instruction. He
Yeah.
referred the governor to his superior police officer.
Yeah,
The introduction of state police will face some of these challenges. What do
definitely.
you think could be the way out?
Definitely. I think that whole incident really should be, shall we say, a beacon to make it clear that the flaws of the 1999 Constitution, because we're talking about CSP,
Okay.
Chief Superintendent of
Police,
Police,
yes.
and even the IG. With all due respect, they're all civil servants. We didn't elect them; they were chosen, right? And so, how they can outrank our elected governor on issues of our own security is, to me, very shocking. I think that that case in particular is very complex. You know, when
Okay.
you look at it, there are victims on two sides: the original landowners who had their lands taken away from them, and the innocent buyers of this land who bought land. You know, that had been changed hands several times over. It
Okay.
came with like a C of O. Which is the ultimate benchmark of legality. So they are as much victims of the crimes of previous state government. And so to have a situation where, you know, police are creating a nuisance and you know, contributing to insecurity uh, is just absurd.
Okay. When you look at that particular scenario, and we tend to wrap it around state police, the thing about hierarchy is still going to, surface. The police officer refused the orders of the chief chief security officer of the state and referred him to the inspector general of police, because the inspector general of police have the, like, represents the president, where when you talk about chief security officer, and the state governor was supposed to have the commissioner of police, but currently now that's not what's happening. So when it comes into place, it's still the same thing that is going to be, and it looks like state police already defeated on its way down.
Well, I think, well, under this current administration, maybe, but
Okay.
I think future administrations and a lot of state governors want this. And I think what a lot of people need to understand that state policing is not either or.
Okay.
There are systems around the world where you have your state police and you have your federal police. Now, the federal police have jurisdiction on certain crimes, because at the end of the day, we wouldn't want a state police where, you know, the state police has to go against the governor, say in areas of election. That would be unrealistic, because, you know, there's issues of corruption, and will the state police be able to effect certain judgments and such? And so that is why we would have a federal police and a state police, right? State police will have jurisdiction on some issues, federal police will have jurisdiction on other issues, and a court can grant jurisdiction in certain cases back to the federal police. And I think that's the way forward. You know, it's not either or.
Okay, now let's move from that back to Mr. President's position and some of the issues. Nnamdi Kanu, Mr. President said he will not interfere with the work of the Nigerian judiciary. What's your response to that?
100%. I laud that approach, and no president should ever interrupt the job of the judiciary. No governor should ever impede the work of the judiciary, but we all know it happens. So this is a good start, and I would like to see every subsequent government, including this one, enact that across board, regardless of whatever their stake or position is on that particular issue. That would be the dream.
Okay. Before we completely before I let you go completely, lastly, there are some things were said to the president, and they asked for his final words. They talked about 2023, they talked about the Nigerian youth, and they talked about unemployment. So 2023, and he gave his last word on it. It's not interfering with the elections. So, and choosing his support the next. So what's your take on that?
I think, you know, while that sounds good, I would like him to interfere in the sense that he ensures free and fair elections.
Okay.
I would like him to interfere in the sense that he helps us sign the electoral bill to ensure that we have free and fair elections. So that's the extent to which his interference can get. Not in the sense of trying to pull any particular person, which he's made clear he wouldn't do. But what we'd see is that, what we'd like to see is that he does ensure free and fair elections. That could be the legacy of this administration. That could be his gift to Nigerians as he you know, steps down.
Okay. Well, Dakbo Adaramewa, I would like us to just go on and on, but time is really not our friend here. So I want to say very big thank you for your time this morning with us on the program.
Thank you very much.
All right. Now, let's go to stories making the rounds in Kenya and the front page of the Star newspaper. Inside Raila's election battle plan for August. And you have Madango Sudi called truce to plan Ruto Eldoret rally. How Deputy President is being played off by Uhuru Raila political machinery concerning 2022 elections. And Mount Kenya numbers will determine next president, says Ngiri. We move from that to stories making the rounds on the front page of the Times UK newspaper. Boost for holidays as travel test scrapped. 1 in 15 had COVID in England last week. You want to take a look at that. Djokovic to be deported from Australia. Carlson, a verdict isn't a license to destroy statutes. Maxwell lawyers demand a retrieval over abuse victim on jury, and dementia suffers wins age discrimination against ASDA. Let's go to stories making rounds on the front page of the Washington Post newspaper. How the GOP became party of Trump's election lie after January 6. It's today being the 1 year incident of the riot at Capitol Hill in the United States of America. And a Garland, Justice Department will hold those responsible for January 6 riot accountable. GOP officials in Arizona's largest county affirmed 2020 election was secured, debunking Trump claims. Republicans float tweaks to Electoral Count Act as Democrats make a voting right push. These homes are off-grid and climate resilient. They are also built out to thrash. And that's where we'll draw the curtain this morning on the newspaper review. Many thanks for watching, and I want to say another thank you again to Mr. Dakbo Adaramewa. You can send eyewitness report to info@highimpactstudios.com and direct messages on all our social media platforms at ImpactTV and ImpactTV UK. I'm Oyin Priye Krumale, back to the Tia Coffee Studios for the early morning program. Do stay with us.